has a.
Fred was asking, Fred was asking, someone was asking the question, what really needs the research. Yeah. Thanks for holding both of our. Fine. Oh, you're gonna have. What did you see it? Yes, sir.
That's all right.
You haven't seen it? All right. Thank you. So it didn't just start.
Exactly. Yeah, this is yeah.
You streamed this thing. Oh, yeah. Hey, Mark, you ready for Space Day Friday?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. I'll go.
Hopefully it will be coming. It's like hell it did. Wow, questionable. Yes, ma'am.
If you guys would, when you make a motion, if you would please say your name first. Just one, and then if you ever second, those are the main points I need to know. And of course, the audience, if they get up to talk.
Yes, ma'am. Barbara had told me about that earlier today, and I was going to make that first thing tonight.
One, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Phil, are you connected yet?
I am.
Clint's there.
He's good. Yeah.
Clint, are you online?
Did you say Clint? Clint is here.
Oh, yes.
Great nation of ours, and pray that we all make the right decisions and we do it for the right reasons. Amen.
Everybody join me in the pledge of allegiance to the flag of our country. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we get started tonight, I would like to introduce Dr. Dallas Beebe to everyone. He is our new CEO, and we are proud, we're really proud and glad he decided to come out here and give us some direction.
It took some decisions, soul searching, but having met with the board previously and had several discussions with them, I will say the strategy that they have is what convinced me that they were going to do the right things for the right reasons and that they were heading in the right direction. And what is based upon that I saw just briefly is for the consumers, their members. So I'm proud and thankful for the opportunities. Thanks. Nobody told me to say that.
Mr. President, I would also like to thank you, sir, for stepping in and being our CEO, interim CEO. I think that you probably had an eye-opening year.
Most definitely.
And I think staff would agree that they were through your leadership this past year went as smoothly as it could. So thank you for.
I agree with that. Went as smoothly as it could with me leading.
Well, and I know you're a man that's running a business, and you were here. The amount of time that you put into this, you were here all the time. So it's not taken lightly. So thank you.
As a board member for however many years I've been a board member, it was truly an eye-opening experience. And I would, if I was able to do that when I had started, it would have done a lot different than I would have done. Very good. Mr. Secretary, do we have a poll?
Yes, sir.
All right. I'd like to remind everybody that audio and video recorders are in use. We're also live streaming tonight, and please silence your cell phone. You can get the approval of the minutes and transcripts from the November 17th Holly Bar Water System Board of Directors regular meeting, our November 17th vehicle auction, and our November 17th special meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve as presented. William Goulet.
Mike Kennedy seconds.
Is there any discussion? None noted. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Approval of memberships. We have to approve 298 new memberships, 238 canceled memberships, and 1 transfer during November.
Mike Kennedy makes a motion to approve as presented.
Mark Miller seconds.
Any discussion? None noted. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Review of the November financial statements. In fact, we've got a copy of our November financial statements. Everyone had the chance to review them, and are there any questions?
Mike Kennedy makes a motion to approve financial statements as presented.
Grant Sauer, second motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? None noted. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. I hope the next one goes up. Nope. 2021 proposed budget. I gotta get my notes. Let me go ahead and get a motion on this, and then we'll open it up.
William Goulet will make a motion to approve as presented.
Mike Kennedy will second.
Motion and a second. Now open for discussion. We'll wait on Mark and get back to floor. This is gonna be quick. We'll go ahead and vote on it.
So when he gets back, you want to walk through the budget?
We can, or we can have. just let everybody know, myself and Mike spent quite a bit of time with staff, going through the budget, going through the line items and the projected future costs and our unrestricted capitalized, maintenance expenses and, our capital maintenance, plans and our restricted, long-term capital plans, including the Eglin project and numerous other, capital expenditures, which are going to start moving next year.
Can I ask a question, Darrell?
Sure.
On, under water transmission or distribution lines, we have antiquated water replacement and fire protection. There's no line item budget on it anywhere.
What line are where?
I think it's like page 5.
Well, that line item is only on there because of all the discussions we've heard in the past on that to show that there is no.
I can't hear you, Bill.
Oh, sorry, Debbie, I'm gonna step over here closer to the speaker. That line item is there because there's been a ton of discussion about that line item. It's only to show that there's actually no money in there. There's a couple other line items, I think, that have no numbers beside them too, which is to indicate the potential future liability of relocation of everything on highway. Okay.
Thank you.
So, I guess ultimately, I want to point out that when we first started, as a new board this year, we had a visioning process. And the board, set our 8 high-level objectives. And the key objective that we had set is conduct a comprehensive review of all Holly water system, water and sewer infrastructure, and develop a long-term plan to repair, replace deficient infrastructure. And from that, we have empowered staff and management to then start looking to improve and replace and repair deficient infrastructure, which is one of the reasons, this is the reason that we have the budget that we're looking at right now. They did what we asked them to do.
Okay, so this budget that we're being presented with includes a 5% increase, and would you explain the 1.2%, what the intent of that is?
What the intent of that is our ongoing, each year moving forward, our costs are increasing, more rapidly than our revenues are increasing. If you remember back in 2014 or 15, I believe it is, the board passed a 17.5% increase, which got us current at that time. And since then, we've been going a little further, and further behind, which has not been evident in the financial statements because of the delay in doing and making needed capital improvements to the system, needed capital maintenance, which has made those things build up further and further to where we're at today. So we do have a lot of maintenance projects out there that need to be handled, but we need the funding to be able to do it. The 5% gets us to where we think we need to be at today. If we do, or the 6.2% gets us to where we think we need to be at today. And the additional consumer price index adjustment going forward will allow us not to set a rate today and then go negative next year, or cause the board to raise rates annually going forward. It's something that we feel, or that staff feels needs to be done, to adjust each year for inflation.
Is the intent that this 1.2% is going to be factored in as a regular rate increase, or is it going to be based on the consumer price index every year? If we're going to adjust our rates annually now,
It will be based on the consumer price index each year, which may be 1.2%, maybe 0.5, maybe 0. It may be more. But the board will review that every year, and we'll look at that consumer price index.
And I believe, Mr. President, we were talking about using the Social Security Administration's, inflation number. So this year it won't. So we're using the Social Security.
That's a national number, right?
Sure.
So my point is, we've got, in the state of Florida, wages are gonna be going up $1 an hour every year for the next 5 years until it reaches $15 an hour. And while we don't have a lot of minimum wage employees, we do have, some that are there or close to it, and that they may not be affected in year 1 or year 2, but, they will eventually get affected, because it's gonna be $15 an hour at the end of all this.
And I would argue that you can't keep wages stable for people at the bottom end of the salary schedule. In other words, if we've got somebody here that's been here for 5 years that's making $13 an hour, we need to raise him up before the guy that we hired last week that's making $13 an hour.
That was where I was going with it, is even if they're making minimum wage now, the ones that are making over minimum wage that have been here for 5 or 10 years, that, as minimum wage goes up, costs of everything goes up, your gallon of milk, your gas at the gas station, everything's gonna go up because of this minimum wage increase. And so all employees are gonna need some adjustment to their pay, maybe not, quite as much as the lower income employees.
Yeah.
So, I see the need for the 1.2%, at least for the next 5 years,
We think that will carry us forward, and cover that cost.
I have a problem with the 5%, because as I'm looking over the budget, there are several items that I found, and I'll mention the line numbers if that'll help, so that all y'all can see what I'm referring to. First of all, we ran a net income this year, and we're a nonprofit organization, so, I know this budget factors that, it's a wash pretty much. There's a little bit of a gain or loss factored into it, but, based on what our budget was last year and the numbers that we actually did, we made money. And so I'm kind of, having a little bit of a hard time with a 5% increase if we're, showing a substantial net income at the end of the day. Now, on line 29,
I got a question on that though. How did we pay for the clarifier? Did we get a loan for that, or did we pay that out of general fund? Was that some savings, or?
The clarifier replacement was replaced out of restricted funds, not out of the unrestricted. I'm sorry, Debbie, I did it again. The clarifier was replaced out of restricted funds, not unrestricted funds. I think most of the commentary that's occurring here is the unrestricted side. The restricted side, just to cut to the chase and maybe get that out of the way, it's all the capital improvements, all of which have been approved by the board in the past. The costs have decreased. And because these things are going to have to be financed this year, we're directed to put on the highest cost and let's be as conservative as possible. But the impact fees right now say that they will pay for those improvements, at least in the short term. So I don't believe that, and I know some of Mark's concerns because he expressed them previously. I don't think his conversation is going to be related to the restricted side as much as the unrestricted side.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
And one thing you'll see on the unrestricted side this year, because you're asking about a net profit, the unrestricted capital expenditures for this year, we had proposed the project proposed were $1,442,000 for 2020.
what line number are you on?
I'm on the 2021 proposed budget unrestricted funds capital improvement. But if you look at 2020, the yellow column, you'll see where we budgeted $1,442,000. To date, we've only spent $739,000. Now those maintenance projects didn't go away.
Right.
They just didn't get done this year.
And my point on that is, that money should still be in our cash account since we didn't pay to get that done, and therefore, we don't need to budget that as an expense for next year. It should be paid out of our cash reserve, because it's money that was budgeted that wasn't spent.
That is correct. We got more.
Well, that actually got, I'm sorry,
Oh.
I mean, even though we had a leftover carryover, the numbers, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, but the numbers that you're seeing, the carryover went over for the 2021 budget. In other words, if we didn't spend it, whatever it came over to 2021, and we're still short. If when we look at it, our problem area is in the unrestricted area. And those are all the unrestricted capital improvements. And then, again, management has come up with, because we asked them to do that, to make it better, so we can unrestricted funds capital improvement. And so, if I'm hearing you right, you're talking about, Mark, the fact that because we didn't spend the money, well, that still went over, and that got carried over into the next year.
I'm just saying there should be $500,000 somewhere, because we budgeted 1,442 and we spent 976. We're projected to spend 977 by the end of the year. So there's 500,000 left over that should be available in our cash. I haven't looked at what our balance was.
You
Balance sheet was.
You are correct, but in 2021, we're projecting $3.5 million in capitalized maintenance.
Which I have a problem with.
Okay.
That's double,
Which line item?
double what our budget was this year.
Which line item?
Well, I've looked over the list that's in the yellow of all of, it's a wish list basically of everything that, I guess staff has said that we need, but I don't know what each of these are for and what the urgency is on doing them this year. Can they be spread out over other years or not? I think we're taking, we're projecting to spend way more money in 2021. We budgeted 1.4 for this year, and we're budgeted 3.5 million for next year. In prior 3 years, we budgeted we spent 1,450, 1,369, and 1.9 in 2019. So 1.9 was our budget. We only spent less than $1 million. So
And that's the.
it's $2.5 million more than what we spent this year.
I think there's things that are more disrepair than we projected the year before, so that's why they're trying to get them fixed.
And that's also the problem. You keep kicking the can down the road and the numbers get bigger and bigger and bigger. Just because you defer something to the next year or 2 years from now doesn't mean the maintenance goes away. It just means you have to spend it later on, which means that we've accumulated to the point where we are now.
Well, I do agree that there's probably some deferred maintenance that does need to be paid, but, taken care of, but, this is just so much more than what we have, spent in prior years that I'm questioning that. I think that's, there's a lot of, big ticket items on here, general wastewater treatment repairs, 250,000. I don't know what we paid in prior years on that, but, and I don't know what those are for. I don't know what all needs to be done.
Bill?
Oh, heck, no.
Okay, never mind.
I think you got 6 managers on the plan.
Oh, okay.
Those individual items are,
Chris, are you there?
Chris.
I'm here.
What are some of the things at the wastewater treatment plant that haven't been,
Or this make up the 200?
that make up the 250,000 that we need to take care of next year?
That 250,000 for the unrestricted, that's for R&M, that is anything that tends to come up. We have gearbox go bad, when the paddles goes out, we have a compressor or a blower go out. All that is what's charged to that R&M account. It's not specifically anything that's got to be done right away or something that we're trying to work on. It's something that comes up and we gotta fix it. But that's for
we've spent $127,000 on, wastewater treatment repair, so that's double. And then we've got, $175,000 allocated to I&I correction, which our I&I has not been that bad lately. I'm not sure what all we need for $175,000.
Pure luck.
Yeah.
I can speak to that.
Well-
That debate all depends on the water level, groundwater level.
And if I may, on the I&I, if we have this in the budget this coming year, I expect us to be spending this on the I&I. So that we can at least help Chris out a little bit on the reduction as well, so.
I can help Chris out a little bit. So, there are some line items, and I guess I'm speaking to Mark here. There are some line items on the unrestricted capitalized sheet that are in recognition of our history of repairs that have to be made to particular components within the system. Chris's line item that he was just speaking to is actually one of those line items. While Chris might have a list of things that he knows has to be done, there is a certain amount in that line item that is, this is repairs and maintenance capitalized improvements. So it includes all of the unknowns that occur within the system during the year that these guys can't plan for, but you have to have money budgeted to spend. So while you see, and I think you mentioned the number, 127, I think he was budgeted for 200 or 250 this year. I actually think he's had some expenses that hasn't hit the books, and the projected end of the year is higher than the 127. Now, that's an estimate, whatever number's in there at this point in time. But that number for Chris actually is composed of things he knows he had to do next year, and some amount of money for the things that we know can't get wrong. And there's actually a list that Chris presented for those things he knows he has to do. Now, there are other line items on there specifically. I'm just going to pick one. There is a line item on there for generators for the wells for hauling our water system. That's not speculation on Clinton's part. That is Clinton looking at the oldest well having a diesel motor. It's 40 years arm generator that's just as old. And it's time to do something about that.
Is that restricted, or is that on?
That's, it should be on the unrestricted. I think it's a separate line. Yeah. So that line item.
Yeah.
So some of them are specifically identified and staff has gotten detailed cost estimates for those things. But some, just a warning that some of the line items are here just known costs plus unknown costs. You can't operate 2 wastewater treatment plants and forecast everything that has to be repaired or maintained. The cost would be above $5,000, and that's the capitalization. So, not that we couldn't have guessed too high.
If you want to know the list I submitted, just for example, I have a purchase of about $14,000 set aside for auto staplers and Holly plants, because we need new ones there. The ones that we have there now were the original ones, the pepper dry plant, and we're working on them every day. I got a standby generator set aside for Holly, because the Holly wastewater plant does not have a standby generator. We lose power, we can't process sewage. So that's about $170,000 I got set aside for it. I have a 150 set aside for building the headworks number 1 and number 2, trying to reduce the amount of rags that get into the plant, and so on and so forth. We've got several other items here.
And Chris, I'm not picking on you. I just noticed that there were numbers that jumped out at me compared to what, far this year. Each one of these categories, there's some new expenses that, we're adding into the mix, and the grand total is $3.5 million, but we've never spent that on, unrestricted.
Unfortunately, each one of those items has that list of items that are expected to.
And I haven't seen any of that.
Generally, that's a staff meeting that we've had in the past. The budget's never been presented in detail like that.
Right.
Anyone, any board before.
Right.
But we have had several staff meetings, and meetings to
And Mr. President, just as well to clarify, not only did we direct staff to go ahead and start doing this, I think also this year, the hurricane, especially Hurricane Sally, kind of shown some vulnerability points in some areas that, if we take a hit, we lose service. And so you are seeing some of these additional line items that are also part of the reasons the cost is going up, is so that we can make sure that we keep service.
That's right, we've got standby, I believe we have, how many standby generators?
Daryl, I can't remember.
I know we have quite a few in there for that, because during Hurricane Sally, we did lose, a lot of lift stations, because they didn't have any power.
And I want to back up one more time, because I actually don't believe that Mike and Daryl, who attended the most of the budget meetings, answered your question there, so let me try. It is absolutely positively true that of that $3.5 million, some of those improvements are not required this year. When staff put together their list of things that need to be done in accordance with what they were directed to do, for instance, I'm gonna pick on Clinton again, because he's here and can answer questions if he needs to. I think there's three generators for 3 different facilities that are in the $538,000. So Martin, originally Clinton had 1 generator a year for the next 3 years, one in 2021, one in 22, and one in 23. But when staff got done putting together the budget, they accumulated all the costs. It again showed that there was more expense than there was revenue projected for those years. So the reason you see the $3.5 million being expensed in this year is really these two guys looking out for the members. Because originally it showed that instead of the normal $1.5 million being spent in this year, it was a greater number. What they did was, instead of looking at rate increases for consecutive years, they said, look, a certain number of these things, $2 million, are extraordinary kind of one-time costs, stuff that really should have been done, that hasn't been done, that would have been spread out over time and paid for that way. So what really you see is, because those could be spread out, instead of spreading them out over 3 years and making you pay for them in 3 years, let's finance the portion that is kind of the one-time expense, spread it out over 10 years, and it resulted in less of a rate increase required today to meet those expenses. So taking the $3.5 million and not financing it, just divide it by 3 years, that's $733,000 or whatever the math would be over 3 years, instead of the $248,000 a year that you see in each of the next 4 years, which would be the payment for that $2 million. So I just want to acknowledge that you are correct, but not all of that needs to be done this year. It can be spread out, and it was spread out. It was just decided that because a rate increase was obviously required based on those expenses, the way to spread those costs over the future to cause the rate increase to be the least is why it's shown that way. So of the $3.5 million that was identified for the next few years, $2 million of that was identified kind of as one-time, extraordinary. I don't know what the right word is. Y'all help me out here. And then we know that if you look at the average of the last few years, there's been about $1.5 million in any 1 year that's been spent on unrestricted capitalized improvements. So it was decided that would be paid for in cash, and the $2 million would be financed. So again, the $3.5 million isn't paid for in direct cash. You're going to get a loan for $2 million for part of that 3.5. And those costs are spread out over 10 years, not just 3 years. And one other thing, you mentioned the fact in 2000 and this year that we had projected 1.4 And to date, we've only spent 733, but there is some money that's gonna be spent for the year. And I think we're projecting it to be about $900,000. I will, and I know one of these guys will eventually bring it up, but I'm just gonna say it. It's not because the money didn't need to be spent, it's because this year has been kind of a really crazy year, particularly the first 3 months, when if you're a Clinton Wells or a Mark Turner, and you have to buy a big piece of equipment, and I mean, you know what happened in the first 3 months of the year, quite a turnover year with Rob being gone and Daryl being acting CEO. The purchasing policy requires them to follow a procedure, and if they don't get that started, the money doesn't get spent. And for instance, Mark might be on the phone, so he might be able to speak to this. And Mark follows the purchasing policy to buy pumps for a lift station. If that lift station is of a caliber that we're using a higher end pump, and it takes 6 months to come in, we don't pay for it, and he doesn't incur the expense against his line item on the unrestricted sheet until it comes in and we pay for it. So if he didn't get a good head start at the beginning of the year, which is nobody's fault, I'm not saying anybody did anything wrong, but if he didn't get that head start, what I know for a fact that this is the case with some of Mark's stuff, is it's just not going to come in before the end of the year, so we can't incur the expense. It's not that the stuff didn't need to be done. I'm sure there's some line items where we're not going to spend all the money. I don't think Chris is going to spend all this $250,000 in the plant, because some of that was unknowns. So yeah, I granted it won't be, but I would suggest this year's a little bit weird when you look at what we're actually going to spend versus what was approved last year. Just keep that in mind. And that does roll over. Everything that was going to be done goes to next year, and where the 1.5 next year would have been spent probably, that's $500,000 of the 1.5 right now. So again, I don't think staff shoved the $3.5 million into 1 year. I think that actually came as a way, quite frankly, a way to reduce the short-term liability to the members. And correct me if I'm wrong, guys.
No, I think you're right, and the one thing that we did, one thing you mentioned, and I don't know if we're supposed to talk about it or not, but you got your cash in the account now. We do have quite a bit of cash in the account, but keeping the budget the same and projecting forward. You get about 3 years down the line, you don't have any more cash left.
Oh, no, I'm not saying we should deplete our cash, but there should be 500,000 in there that we didn't spend this year that can be spent next year without us.
And I wanted to mention that, because
increasing
I had
our
to
budget.
go get the financials, and right now, if everything goes the way we think it is, and the payouts go at the end of the year, and the cash adjustments, the auditor make us make, we're projecting, I think, I just saw it, a little over $1 million net this year in the unrestricted account. $500,000 of that net, or 600,000 of that net, is the unspent unrestricted capital improvements, but the rest of it is net cash. You're right. So that is true net cash projected today.
So what I'm seeing here is the last increase is 20. Even if we were to do, 1% a year for the last 5 years, we'd be at 5% right now. So basically what we're trying to catch up for the last 5 years by not having the increase to adjust for the things that have happened. The cost of living.
That's what we'll look at.
So,
Good way to look at it.
and a lot of stuff wasn't spent because of COVID, and you could order something. Any of us in the industry knows you could order something today, you might not have it for 6 months because it's not built. Stuff's not sitting on the shelf anymore. You have to actually order it and hope it comes in. So the proposal is what we're talking about here. And just because Mark brought it up, I just want to make sure. So we're talking about a 5% increase, correct? So that's water and sewer.
That's water and sewer.
Okay. And then you're projecting a 1.2 increase annually.
Well, it's going to be the
Per board discretion.
Well, it's going to be an annual increase based on the consumer price index, based on a consumer price index. How the board may choose, Currently, we're using the Social Security index. The board may find a better index.
Okay, so this year, the Social Security one was 1.3 this year, correct?
Okay.
It balances, it's
Yeah,
balancing
it
between
depends on the
1.2
day.
and 1.3.
Depends on the date, okay, so that's why you came to 1.2.
Yes.
So basically, by approving this budget, that's presented, there's also a 5% increase for water and sewer.
That's right.
And then by doing that, the only other increase you're foreseeing is based on the index from Social Security next year, and the board will have to vote on that, of course.
Not necessarily vote on it.
Yeah.
Will I be approve it or?
I think the motion that was made in the resolution establishes an annual increase based on whatever that consumer price index is established. Doesn't, of course, it doesn't prevent any board in the future, even 30 days from now, from changing that. One thing I would add, because, no one brought it up, is there are multiple CPIs, and we're using the Social Security cost of living adjustment, and this goes to your question too, but I wanted to say this for the members as well. We were directed to use that one as opposed to the Bureau of Labor Consumer Price Index. The Bureau of Labor Consumer Price Index is actually quite a bit higher than the Social Security cost of living adjustment. And I think that decision was made and it might bear more closely on what we see here as opposed to the Bureau of Labor, which I think is more heavily skewed, toward metropolitan type areas. So I just throw that out there because, again, neither one of them did it. I think it's worth.
Well, and future boards can do what they're gonna do on this. I mean, we can say that's what we're gonna do, but it'll be up to future boards if they wanna do a rate decrease or a rate increase or do a consumer price adjustment. I mean, I don't think we can direct what is gonna happen.
And that's gonna be based on, Dallas's recommendation. This is based on staff and Daryl's recommendation for this.
But we're looking at a 6.2% increase in rates across the board.
Yes.
At a minimum.
Works out to
Mr.
$1.57
President, if I,
per month on our average water bill and $2.67 a month on our average sewer bill.
how much again was it on average per person for water?
For water, it'd be $1.57,
And for sewer?
and for sewer, it'd be $2.67.
Wonder what the average commercial bill is gonna go up.
I don't know what the average commercial bill is. I don't know that there is such thing.
Well, I'm sure there is. If you add them all up and divide by the number of customers, you can get an average, but it's
But it would probably be
substantially higher than that.
in the real estate industry, I'm sure they use a lot less water than the
No, I'm just saying,
restaurant
it's
industry.
not just gonna affect our residential customers, it's gonna affect our business customers too.
You're correct.
I have one other line item I wanna address on here. It's, on page 229, group insurance. What years we're looking at? 2017, our group insurance was 713,000. 2018, it was 748. 2019, 859,000. This year, we're projecting 960,000. The budget is 1,394,328. That's a 45% increase over this year's projected amount. I know why that is being done because of our org chart, and if we fill every single one of our positions and they all get family coverage built into their policy, that's what the number would come to. But I think that's unrealistic. We never spent over $1 million, including this year, and 1,394,000 is unrealistic budget.
Well, you've got two things there. It didn't go up 40%. I believe the rate increase was maybe 5 or 10%.
No, I'm talking about the
I
budgeted amount versus what we
I
spent.
know what you're talking about, which is budgeted versus reality. And if you looked at last year's budget, you're going to see the same thing in those numbers, the difference between budgeted amount and what actually happened. Now, we've approved the board has approved an organizational chart. The board's approved the salaries on that organizational chart. We've got positions that haven't been filled. We just hired a brand new CEO to lead us into the future. By removing these, we're going to be clipping his wings before he ever gets started. we're not gonna make him come back here every time he wants to hire new employees, because we're gonna budget exactly what we did last year. We're gonna take all those positions that need to be filled out of the organizational chart.
Are the wages budgeted for every single position?
Yes,
that
they
we
are.
got in
Yes.
there? Even though we're not,
Even though we do not currently have them employed.
so, and the likelihood of us filling all of those positions January 1 and having a full organizational chart starting on January 1 is probably 0. Therefore, yes, he's through the course of the year, Dallas is going to begin hiring some of those positions, but I don't know that we can halfway through the year, he'll have them all filled.
I understand what you're talking about, what Daryl's talking about. Here's my version of it. If we don't allow a proper budget to fill every position, like Daryl was stating, we're not allowing him to do his job and make decisions. If he has to come back to the board and ask for money every time he wants to do something, we're not allowing the CEO to do his job. That's not the board's discretion what the day-to-day operations is. So by us not funding the positions properly, he may not hire anybody. He may not spend the money. You might have a $500,000 over what projected budget that we didn't spend because he didn't hire the people and give him benefits. I would rather give him the opportunity to fill these positions as he sees fit. Now, we've hired him for a job. We trust him with the job. We trust him with the money. That's my opinion. We just need to know. Is he going to finalize employees? Probably not, like you said, January 1st. I agree 100%. But if he doesn't have the opportunity, he has to come to the board every time he needs money. It just shows to me that we're not trusting him with the money.
Well, my final comment is going to be that I think these amounts are not realistic. I think we're discussing raising rates more than they need to be raised to be able to operate. And so I'm going to be opposed to this, but I understand y'all have the votes likely to push it through. So that's,
Here's my only question, and back to what Mark said. We're proposing a 5% increase. So what's the 1.2? Is that to start?
That's the start of the CPI, or also including the COLA.
Basically, it goes back to what you said. We've got 1% per year for the past 4 years and 1.2% for next year. So it gets us square for the past years and increases it for anticipated increase in cost next year. It's not just pushing the budget through. We want to get a good budget that everybody understands. It's just like you said in the past. If you get to the end of if the board gets to the end of next year and sees that this is wrong, sees that this is too much, they can adjust rates down. But this is our best presentation of what we think may happen in 2021. And I think we've got to present try and present a balanced budget, so we can reduce the expenses knowing that they may happen, and reduce the revenues.
And the big thing you brought up too, Mark, and I actually talked to Dallas, I talked to Daryl, I talked to Mike about it, and I'll talk to you briefly about it, is by people voting to increase minimum wage to $15 an hour in 5 years, people that are skilled tradespeople, like we have work here, we're forced to bump everybody up. And like I said, we have employees that have been here 5 years, 6 years, 10 years that may not be making $15 an hour that come 5 years, they're going to have to, or they're going to have to make more than that because you hire somebody new at 15, 5 years from now, somebody who's been here 5 years, they're probably not going to stay because that's the new minimum wage. And that's what I'm seeing with trying to adjust this. And we've had to do it in the past. We had to do a wage adjustment in the past. It costs us a lot of money.
I agree with you, and I fully expect that we're going to have to adjust for that, and every year going forward for at least the next 5 years, when the minimum wage goes to $15 an hour, I think the 1.2% is a reality, possibly even more than that. But I don't like the numbers I'm seeing, and I don't like the 5%. So that's my take.
And Mr. President, I would fully respect that, Mr. Miller. Looking through this, I am in favor of this budget. Again, there will be a rate increase, one-time 5%, for the reasons of, speaking with the managers and for them following the directive that we gave them at the beginning of the year the money that we're spending will be improving the service, reducing our liability, that our services will be compromised, and overall, providing a better product to our consumers. So, I would ask though, in your motion, Director Blake, you had just said that you approved the budget. I believe we would want to make the motions where, if you don't mind, sir, that we would also include that the Social Security, the increase equal to the Social Security COLA. Or is it okay that this is?
Sorry to interrupt you. I would say the 6.2% increase for 2021 and the future based on consumer price index.
So, I'm just saying the motion itself, I believe, was stated that you approved as presented.
Which includes the 6.2%. All right. I believe. Is that the proper way to do that?
Well, you're gonna make me speak again.
I was looking back.
I haven't heard Barbara speak up here. I would just throw this out. I believe that there is actually a resolution in your package. And forgive me, Will, I did not hear what your motion was.
I made a motion to approve the budget as presented.
Between these guys and Barbara, they came up with the resolution that exists. I just want to point out that there's a resolution in there. That might be covered or what Mike's talking about. I don't really know. I actually never read the resolution after it was completed, but I don't think Barbara wanted to interrupt.
Number 6.
I'll jump up there for her. The rest is.
No, that's
I didn't see a resolution regarding that.
Because I mean, ultimately, what we're asking the board to do is approve rate increase, but at the same time, we're also going to move forward with a yearly increase of using the Social Security number every month.
And I don't think you can, your budget has to be approved by each board going forward. To say, future boards are bound to do this, I don't think you can do that. I don't think you can bind future boards' hands and say, from now on, they're going to raise the budget or raise rates by, a certain set percentage based on consumer price index or whatever figure you decided.
Why wouldn't we? I mean, I guess my question is why wouldn't we? I mean, everybody.
Because you're gonna have different boards sitting up here next year that may not want to do that, that may you can't.
Yeah, and that board can change.
I don't see the point in us doing it tonight and saying that, every future board is gonna raise their.
What I would have suggested is exactly the way you gentlemen described it, which was you can approve the 6.2 for this next year and then put in place this percentage, whichever index that you choose. Typically you take 5, international, and then you choose the one that best suits this industry for this location, as Phil had said, and then you project that to be going forward, but the board can certainly modify it on an annual basis. That's the way I've always seen it.
Well, right now we
That's standard.
We have a motion to just approve as presented.
Do you want to?
Do I need to clarify it? I mean,
I would amend your motion to include an annual increase based on the consumer price index.
so basically by approving this budget, we're approving the 6.2% increase. And then an annual increase based on the Social Security COLA for the
Consumer price index.
consumer price index. All right, I'll amend my motion to state that.
Would you clarify if the rate increase starts January 1st?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Kennedy, seconds the amended motion.
Is there any further questions or comments?
Discussion.
Sorry.
Just, we usually ask people from the audience if they have any input before we vote. Does anybody have any input they'd like to add?
You said the member rate increase will be 6.2% under those, right?
Yes, sir.
Correct. Answer my question.
Can't hear him.
Joe Campbell, 7146 Brinkley Street, just confirming members rate increase on my water bill will be 6.2%.
Thank you.
Carmen?
Carmen Reynolds, 9621 Sunnybrook Drive, Navarre, Florida. I'm just back there at the meeting like I always come to every month. And a 5% increase for senior citizens on a limited income with no ability to get extra work, part-time jobs, etc., especially in light of COVID, is, I know we're talking $1.57 and $2.67, but to somebody who's pinching pennies and a widow down the street, she's not going to be real happy to hear this. And then the icing on the cake is bump it up another 1.2%. I would ask you gentlemen to just look at 5% and maybe we could edge into that a little slower. This is the beginning of the new year. We've got a lot of folks out of work, wondering how they're going to make it. We've got the unemployment rolling off that they're getting from the state and from the feds. We've got issues with folks in their rentals, and not some of those rental coverages are going to roll off. I would just like you to consider your membership. I know you're going to do what you're going to do. And then when I look at the rest of the proposed agenda here, and I know everybody's getting their pot shots ready, and they're going to say, well, make her sit down. She shouldn't be saying that. But I see that we're going to ask for a new vehicle purchase, and I welcome our new CEO. We've been waiting for you for so long. Thank you so much for that they hired the right guy. But right out of the gate, he's going to get a new vehicle. So I'm just saying the optics on that are a little less than optimum.
We're going to pass that out tonight. We didn't get the quotes in that we needed, so we're not going to discuss that.
I hope those are low quotes. Thank you.
They're within budget.
Since you and Daryl, still leaving?
He's close, he's listening.
Okay, to Ms. Carmen's, recommendation, we're gonna do the 5%. I understand that that's to get us caught up for the last 5 years of not changing anything, okay? Question I have is, if we were to roll this additional 1.2% in, let's say, June, how much would that affect us? The additional 1.2% in June, because that would be 6 months. I'm just asking.
I think that would be hard to do though, right?
But it may be confusing to people because that's another thing I'm thinking of, because it may be confusing because we do 5% now, being referred, come June, they get another 1.2%, then their bill's wrong, and they may think they have a water leak or something like that, or if they use the same amount every month. I don't know, it's just a suggestion, I just put it out there.
And I mean, ultimately for me, I'm looking at the system as a whole. This is what we need for the system as a whole. And I fully respect Mrs. Reynolds' questions there. I do believe we have mechanisms in place that if people are struggling, they can come and talk to our customer service.
I think we do also.
Yeah. But I've been here 2 years. I absolutely believe staff bends over backwards for our members. I've seen it. I'm so happy with them. So, if there is a problem in that area, we will do what we can to help. But, the way that I see, the way that everything's been moving this year, we need the 6.2 to get to where we want to go, and also as the board has dictated.
I'll make one more comment. We're saying this is going to happen January 1st. The December bills have already gone out. So, how are we going to communicate this to our customers that, hey, guess what? Your bill on January 1 is gonna be 6.2% higher, at least the rates are gonna be 6.2% higher. You know, we're just gonna let them go, oh, surprise, you know?
I think we could look at how we've done it in the past. I'm pretty sure there's gonna be an article written in the law press on it.
Not everybody reads the newspaper.
They should, probably will.
It'll be online.
It'll be
but
some social media, hey, do you have a suggestion?
I don't know, I think something like that, when there's a rate increase.
Barbara?
I'm not in favor of spending money, but I think there needs to be a mailing,
Hey, Barbara,
because not everybody goes online.
when's the next billing cycle start?
It would be should be the second week of January. Amber, am I correct on that? Yeah, that would be correct.
So,
For the usage from December 1st to December 31st, and that bill will print, usually print sometime between the 10th and the 13th of January.
so basically, this rate increase wouldn't start until their next billing cycle if we do it after January 1st, is that correct?
For the bill that goes out in February, correct?
Okay, so they'll basically, by this going on the next billing cycle on January 1st, it's not gonna come out until February on that bill.
But I think to put both of them together, I think we could probably include a notice in the December, billing, which will come out in January. That way, Barbara?
That's correct.
Your agenda says it has to be approved by the members on the 19th, so it should not go into effect till then, correct? Your agenda says that.
This is a proposed budget.
Oh, yeah, it's
Approved by the members on the 19th, so.
Well, it would be approved by the board of directors on the 19th.
Yes, check.
But the December bills, which will not include a rate increase, will go out in the middle of January.
Okay.
Therefore.
So that's gonna be billed at the current rate, so
That'll
there'll be a
be-
notice put in there saying.
Your rate increase, you need,
Your rate.
yes. Okay, you fine with that, Mark?
Well, I mean, I just wanted to clarify that.
That'll save some money on the mailing, it won't be a separate mailing.
Okay.
Thank you, Barbara.
Yes, sir.
Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? No. I'll break the tie and say aye.
Who's the second now? Who is the second now?
Good. And Mark.
Fred and Mark?
Yes.
Grant.
Brent and Mark, thank you.
The motion passes. So, that actually didn't last. SRC well protection area and land development code change. If you've been awake, you know that, what our, county commission did last, Thursday at their meeting. We have, I've met with staff, Mike's met with staff. We are working on a plan to go forward. We've also, been in communication with the city of Gulf Breeze, trying to coordinate, a plan. Kind of where we're at right now.
Mr. President, if I could say, I mean, I'm just, so disappointed in the outcome of removing the protected language in our well field protection zone. I mean, you were there, Mr. Miller was there.
And it seems to benefit a few people in one special interest group at the expense of, 86,000 people in our service area, or 86,000 people in the south end of the county, up to 100,000 people in Santa Rosa County, just to the benefit of a few landowners. And that is very sad for our elected officials.
Mr. President, I know I spoke to you about this earlier, and I think the board should recognize that, the importance of this to not only our members, but to everyone else out there that may be listening. Do we need to take any type of action by authorizing Dallas to use whatever means necessary, whether legal, in order to block this, prevent this?
That was gonna be my next request. We have been engaged with Will Dunaway, for the previous two meetings, with planning and zoning and with the Board of County Commissioners. I would like to entertain a motion that we allow staff to, continue that engagement. This will be more of a new engagement, with him. It will also possibly include some partnerships, which will offset the cost of our members.
Yeah, what I see happening, because it's not just hauling our water system, it's Midway, it's Gulf Breeze, it's Navarre Beach, it's all Fairpoint customers. It's East Milton, whether the folks up there know it or not, it's affecting their water supply too. So, but at least from our standpoint, I foresee this as being something that all of our utilities, are probably going to want to move forward with any legal options we have to object to this, and there are multiple state agencies that are going to need to be dealt with on this. And so, what I would like to see in the motion is that, yes, that they be directed to continue to work with Will Dunaway, but I'd also like to see Fairpoint sharing the cost in that, because it doesn't make sense for each individual utility to hire their own attorney to duplicate efforts. Yeah.
I agree with you, but I'm gonna be a little greedy now. I don't mind taking on partners with this, but I wanna make sure that we leave on our water system needs. I have total faith in our staff, and I want to make sure that our members' interests are protected. I don't want anybody else directing that effort.
Right. No, I agree. If we think more needs to be done than Fairpoint, then obviously we'll do that. In fact, what I would like to see is, in addition to Will Dunaway, I'd like to see us engage Liberty Partners to find out what they can do as far as efforts in Tallahassee with some of these state agencies.
I have been in communication with them, and they've asked for a little bit of additional information before they get started.
Okay.
So, I was gonna make two motions if I may.
Well, one at a time.
Yeah. So, Mr. President, so one, I would like to make the motion that, Dallas, we authorize Dallas to start putting together the plan for those that put together the plan to be able to, combat this, the fact that we've lost the protection of the well field. So that's the first one, that he has the authority to do so. That's the motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, so for discussion here, for this, Dallas will be leading this up, and game planning this out, and then letting us know what we need to do, because my next motion is gonna be that, well, I'm gonna ask, after we vote on this, I'm gonna ask that you give, the Fairpoint representatives, which is Mark and myself, authority to then engage Fairpoint then as well. And so we're doing a two-pronged approach, then, we're doing everything possible. But my first one is that if you guys need to add anything to that motion to give Dallas what he needs to, if you think my motion's fine, or.
I just think they would stay in there, so Dallas needs to engage with Will Dunaway and Liberty Partners, and the other partners who are calling up our water system in order to engage this.
Yeah. So does my motion to give Dallas the authority that he needs to do what Will has said, does that still stand? Everybody agree with that?
I think so. I think that Dallas probably has a pretty clear understanding of what we're wanting here, and he, as the CEO, he has spending authorization and can engage our legal team as he sees fit. You know, we're not here to micromanage what he does. But you know,
It's just being put on record.
yeah, no, I understand. Yeah, I mean, we want it to be a clear directive from this board that is a high priority, probably our highest priority we have right now to deal with this. So, anyway.
So I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? None noted. All those in favor?
Wait a minute.
Oh, sorry. Doesn't affect the record. Doesn't affect your motion at all. Okay. So it is. Doesn't affect your motion. So okay.
Name and address for the record.
Okay, I'm Tom Beckman at 24159 Pine Drive.
I can't hear him, I'm sorry. I can't hear you, sir.
Tom Beckman at 24159 Pine Drive in the bar. How's that? Better?
Yeah.
Better. We wake up New Year's 2021 and the whole review process will be over. We have to work quickly. Sean Ward will have not the land development code, but the comprehensive plan into the state by the end of this week. And he will ask for an expedited review. And the expedited review statutorily requires that the reviewing organizations, and you receive the list of all of them, I gave to Ross and Kennedy. Those comments have to all be in within 30 days. So if we come early to the party, to the reviewing organizations, reviewing agencies, that's our best chance to get their attention. We've already gotten their attention. The gentleman from the ordinance modification review team who's leading the team has already sent me a couple of emails back and forth saying, yeah, we know you have a problem with it. Thank you, and we'll be on with our review when the time comes. Our goal, I think, needs to be to get any agencies, but especially Florida Department of Environmental Protection and the Northwest Florida Water Authority, help me out here, Water Management District. Those are the two heavy hitters, according to Sean Ward, whose comments will have the most weight in this particular action. Everybody else on that long list, it's a hum for them, they don't care. But if DEP and the water district have problems with it, that's good for us. Our goal needs to be for one or both of those organizations to render an objection to the pending change. There are objections, recommendations, or comments. Those are the three mechanisms by which agencies respond back to the reviewing economic development people, curiously enough, who manage the review, and say, well, I have a real problem with it, don't do it. I recommend you do it this way or do something else. And I have a comment about it. The objections must be dispositioned by the county. The county must give a response to objections. They don't have to give a response to recommendations or comments. So our goal should be for the two big water authorities at the state level to render objections on our behalf. And I think our correspondence to them needs to state that specifically, object to this on our behalf. Because of course we all know the science. We pounded away on it Thursday night for 3.5 hours. Take the dirt away. I'm a civil engineer, okay? I'm not a geologist or a hydrologist, but I know a little bit about dirt. And if you take the dirt away, you take the water away with it, because the dirt holds the inventory of the water and it purifies the water. In the simplest terms, that's what Mother Nature gives us. So that's what the county wants to let their northern folks do, is take our inventory of dirt that protects our water and go and stick it under our foundations, like one commissioner drew us an analogy last night. A horrific analogy. Let's build a house instead of saving our water.
Hit golf balls.
Don't get me started. I've bit my lip to bleeding 1 dozen times.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
The 30-day clock you referenced, does it start at the meeting that they have where they approve this, or is the date that they get the comp plan from Sean?
The clock starts when it arrives on the reviewing editor-in-chief authority's desk. So first, Sean has to issue it. The state has to give it a case number, and that case number can be found in Florida Papers, the Florida Papers link that is also on the list of links that Sean Ward sent us, because he responded to all of my questions about how the process would proceed, how we make the sausage. When it appears on Florida papers, it's real and the clock starts, and then comments or no comments will be created. There's a thing called timely comments. I presume that all these organizations can produce comments after the 30-day deadline. Those can be completely ignored. Timely comments are the ones that statutorily have to be addressed, and the objections have to be statutorily responded to. Injunctive opportunities to force them to not make the change. We need to look at the possibility that we do not have mature water harvesting forecasts for the future, next decade, the next 20 years. You guys are struggling with your budget for the next couple of years, and over here on the shelf sits Dallas, behind Dallas's chair, the projection for where all our water is going to come from for the next 20 years. If we have that, paradoxically, that's a bad thing, because we should tell the respective water authorities commenting on this document, hey, we need some help forecasting whether the East Milton field will be sufficient for our needs 2, 3, 5 years from now, whether they dig there or not. And oh, by the way, we're growing down here. We're expanding our water needs. You're contracting our water supply. Man on the street doesn't understand this logic, nor do we. That's another possible lever. But if we can tell the reviewing authorities that we need space and time to figure out where our water is going to come from in the future, and we don't know that right now, then Dan, you better not mess around with the available water we have now in the East Milton well field. Those mechanisms, I think, have to be our strategy for how we can put a lever into stopping this unbridled parochial nepotistic action that happened last Thursday. It was unscientific, it was uncalled for, and it was self-serving for the north half of the county at the expense of the south half of the county, as we all witnessed on Thursday night. So there's just some ideas, guys, and you're welcome. And I'm at your disposal if you want any more help working with Sean. He and I have a working relationship based on my work with Holly by the Sea Strategic Planning Committee. That's why we're interested in the thing. But we're interested in it just like everybody else, the nearly 100,000 people on the south side of the county who will turn their faucet on 10 years from now and no water will come out. It's my letter to the editor, says Sandy Kent. That would be a bad day. It would be a bad economic development day. It would be bad overall for the whole place. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you, gentlemen.
I don't see no water coming out. You think our rates are going up 6% now. If they have to install a $500,000 filter on the well up there, it's going to come out, but it's going to be a whole lot more than 6%.
I decided unprofessionally, I decided to wax melodramatic, okay? Because if people aren't going to read the newspaper, they might watch the soap operas and they might read provocative letters to the editor. At least now they're involved, okay? At least now, because as soon as we wake up our political clout down here, as Dave Peach has said to me personally, we can dictate every single one of the Board of County Commissioners who sit up there. We already have that political stroke down here, as we proved with the way District 4 was managed vote-wise in the last several years. Now is the time to wake up to that power as well.
We have you have your second.
Yeah, we have a motion in a second. Carmen, were you going to say something?
Carmen Reynolds, 9621 Sunnybrook Drive. For the record, I wanted to state that something really isn't right when the Navarre Beach water system that is owned and managed and run by our own county was disenfranchised by that action on Thursday night. So Navarre Beach water system is left hanging out in the cold, and the East Milton water system users have been disenfranchised also. So this is a really, really suspect thing magnified by the fact that all it's going to take, because we are dependent on that very fragile, shallow sand gravel aquifer, we are not allowed to deal with the Floridan aquifer. All it's going to take is an extended drought, and we have a distinct problem. That is the big picture. So the citizens are up in arms about this. There is a petition right now on Concerned Citizens of Navarre for the citizens to participate in against this action to show public sentiment. We will be establishing within the week a Facebook page about this travesty, where the citizens and other folks interested can come and glean information and status. When you all find out what you're doing and your action is, if you will let me know so that we can follow that and keep the people informed so that they know where to go to about this, we would really appreciate it. And lastly, we are developing a very detailed list of information, findings, and investigatory work for this board, and I will submit that preliminary report to you in the morning, President Lynch.
Thank you, Carmen. All right. So, motion second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, my second one, just to get it on the record, is to have this board authorize the representatives of Hollywood to work with Fairpoint so that the board agrees that as representatives, we should be, advocating that we want Fairpoint to be, working toward this, is what I'm getting at. First I want to talk about it is that you're authorizing us to make sure that as representatives of Hollywood Water System, when we become Fairpoint board members, we are also pushing for this same ending. So my motion is that you would just authorize the two representatives to represent Hollywood Water System in the same game.
I'll second that motion. Will you like?
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? None, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Number 4, 2021 cost of living adjustment. For 2021, we have we are proposing a 1.3, I believe, percent cost of living adjustment. There have been no raises this year, or no merit raises this year. So this will be the.
Are you recommending 1.3% now?
I believe that's what we are. What did you recommend? What did employees union for?
Mike has 1.3.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, 1.3, and it just seems that we're just following the inflation.
Okay.
I'll make a recommendation to the board to allow COLA, which is the cost of living adjustment of 1.3% for the employees on our water.
Mike Kennedy seconds.
You have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Now, does that include Messi and the golf course also, or is it just?
They generally follow our lead on this, so that does generally include them also.
I'm in line to include that also.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Yes.
Okay.
You're checking, right? Well, my question is, we have a newly hired CEO that has a contract. We have the golf course manager who we just made a salary adjustment to. Will they get a COLA adjustment to their contracts or not?
Yes, that's the question. I guess
think-
that's a question for us, but.
I think Dallas already has his built in his contract, I believe, so
Right.
that won't be added to Dallas's contract.
Right. I wanted to
Just,
clarify
just so
that.
you know that.
And as far as Cindy.
I think, in my opinion, Cindy would get the cost of living adjustment. We gave her a raise, and now you're going to take away part of it?
Well, no, we're not taking away part of it, we're just not, we would just be saying.
That part of
That
that
is-
raise, part of your raise that we gave you was actually cost of living increase.
In my,
That's why I want to clarify.
in my
Goodness of
opinion,
what?
Dallas has already built in his contract, but yes, Cindy will also receive the 1.3 cost of living increase also.
Okay, that's fine.
Is there any further discussion? None noted, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Number 6, or number 5, calling for water system and messy check signers. We're also going to do, add the club at Hidden Creek to this item. Currently, I am a check signer, and, not that our new CEO is not. I will be rolling off the board. Generally, we do have the president sit as a check signer. I think with me rolling off the board, in January, and Mark, staying on the board, we believe Mark is running for the board again. And I'm not. I think that I would like to make a motion that, we remove myself and Director Goulet from the checking account and add, Dallas and Mark to replace us. But to get Dallas on all the accounts, including the club at Hidden Creek, which I don't believe I'm on.
You wanna make a recommendation or wanna make a motion?
I don't know, is that a recommendation? Okay.
Will Goulet would like to make a motion to put Dallas on all the accounts for companies and company credit card.
Yes.
And remove Daryl and Will from check signing abilities. And then also put Mark on there also for check signing.
For which organization would I be on?
For whichever accounts need an additional cycle.
Whichever accounts need additional sign. Does anybody want to second that?
Kennedy seconds.
Go for the motion and second, is there any discussion? None noted, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now we're to number 6, one that I've been working on for a while. Proposed commercial impact fee, usage review. In our agreement with our members, we agreed to, that they reserve a certain capacity, in the system that they're allowed to use. Sometimes through time, through growth, they end up exceeding those usages. Part of our agreement is that we can review those usages, and if there's any overages, we can charge an additional impact fees, at that time. This is not done on a regular basis within the system, and it's been my goal for the past few months to get an effective policy, passed by the board to direct staff to review the accounts on a regular, biannual basis, to see if there are any problems with any accounts. I guess I would like to make a motion that all commercial accounts will be reviewed on an annual basis beginning January 1st, 2022. If any account is found to be using 10% or more water on an annual average or maximum monthly basis is appropriate, then they have reserved with impact fees, then they will be contacted and given a varied period of time, depending on overage, but not more than 12 months, to reduce their average monthly or maximum month usage to the amount reserved by their paid for impact fees. Should the commercial account not reduce their consumption, they will be charged an additional impact fee based on their most recent annual average or maximum monthly usage as appropriate. So additional impact fees due in excess of $1,000 may be financed with board approval for a period of time not to exceed 2 calendar years. The additional impact fees shall be added to the monthly bill. A report will be given to the board of directors annually of actions taken by staff. The first reporting period for this policy shall be the calendar year 2021. Prior to July 1st, 2021, staff shall provide a warning letter to all commercial customers regarding the enforcement of policy beginning January 1st, 2022, and shall provide a summary of the current water usage for the account and the implication to the customer of the enforcement of policy. That's my motion. That was Darrell Lyncher.
I will second it for discussion.
We have a motion and a second.
All right, so here's my, Bill, you're gonna get called in on this. So here's my question. Per our permit, we're supposed to reduce water usage. I understand the logic behind this. Supposed to conserve, that's how we started the website and putting stuff on the website to include how to save water, how to conserve water. I understand that. Here's my question. If you guys like to be devil's advocate, so I'm gonna play that card for tonight. Let's say a restaurant came in and they paid so many, what are they called? ERUs, okay? Let's say they paid for so many ERUs 10 years ago. And their business has blossomed since then. Are we gonna base their usage on last year's number? Or are we gonna base their usage on how many ERUs they paid for 10 years ago? That's the question I have.
So, according to the motion that he just made, every commercial account is credited for some payment of an impact fee, which equates to a certain number of ERUs, and an ERU is 300 gallons per day, essentially annual average, or max day, depending on which is appropriate, per forever. So beginning January 1, 2022, each commercial account would be reviewed their usage for the past 12 months, not any time in the past beyond that, but just for the previous 12 months. And if they were using more water than they have paid for, reserved capacity for through the impact fee payment, they would be treated according to one of the classifications that he was.
The only thing is, have we changed our ERU requirements over the last few years?
Well, I don't know what you're asking, but
I don't know what you're asking.
I do believe there is a fair question that has come up from other people with regard to what he said. Many people, the last impact fee increased to $22.50 and $4,200. Gosh, it's been probably 8-9 years ago. But I would guess a significant number of the commercial accounts pay less per ERU than that. Whatever usage they're using now would be charged at the current cost for impact fee. Does that answer your question? Was that what you were asking? Or did I answer the wrong question?
No, it's the way you answered it. Basically, let's say my business bought 5 ERUs based on 10 years ago. What is the equivalent of that ERU today?
There's no change. There's no change in the amount of water per ERU.
An ERU is 300 gallons per day.
Right. Well, what did I pay for my ERUs 10 years ago?
Oh, I mean,
that's different.
See, that's what I'm trying to
explain. If you went far enough back, you paid nothing for it.
And see, that's the other question. Do we grandfather those people in and start from 2021, or do you go back a business that may have been a mom and pop business that had 20 seats, now they got 100 seats, and I understand the reason behind this. I understand this, but I'm just putting it out there. We have to let everybody know that's how this is being presented.
Your example right there has happened this past year. We had at least once to the extreme where we had one restaurant that was a 20-seat pick up and go restaurant. And today it is a full service restaurant that's a lot bigger. that use a lot more water. And their impact fee should have been $60,000 higher.
And of course,
And of course, that has not been reviewed over the past, I don't know, as long as I've lived here, 25 years. And this policy will straighten that out. This will make it to where people are reviewed on an annual basis and you won't get so far out of whack.
And everything, because we're still talking, these ERUs, this is for capacity. So this is for capacity, so
That's right.
we did not bill, and we are not charging for someone that is using 10x more than they did 10 years ago. So it wasn't in the, so basically they get the free service of all the capacity. And as members that are all paying for this system, everybody has to pay their fair share.
And I'll go ahead and tell everybody on the online world today, this directly affects me. Because I have a renter that where we paid 1 ERU or 1.2 ERUs for one of the buildings that I own that we now rent. And I think Corey said he's using 4.5.
Now, the only thing is, though, the ERU is based on, let's say, commercial business that uses sewer, what if you have septic?
No, it's just, it is.
it's only for what you're using. So if you're grandfathered in and sewer wasn't available to you commercially, you wouldn't pay a sewer impact fee. You'd only pay a water impact fee.
What I'm saying, are those customers gonna be affected by this new policy?
Every commercial customer that exists in the franchise area would be affected by the motion that you just made. If assuming that they're using more water than they have reserved capacity.
We're talking about charging somebody for something they've never paid for.
But the only thing is, this is the way I'm looking at it, though, if that person isn't hooked up to the sewer system.
Well, there's separate water impact fees from sewer impact fees. Water impact fees, $2,250 for ERU, sewers $4,200. So if you're a restaurant, you're on a septic tank, we're all looking at your water use. We're not looking at your sewer use. We can't charge you for that.
That's how I wanted to clarify.
Yeah, we don't do that now, so.
I want to clarify, not everybody knows, there's a lot of questions that we may know the answers for that the average person doesn't know unless they ask.
And there are actually are a lot of, I think, commercial accounts on 98 that, had water service long before sewer was available, and they've never had a problem with their septic tank, and, until the health department decides to enforce state law, this board's policy has been that there is no requirement to connect.
I have two comments. One is, okay, we're gonna be reviewing every commercial account, and there will very likely be the majority of them that are using more than what they have paid for when they signed up. However, what about somebody that when they opened up their business, they were charged for 5 ERUs and their usage shows that they're only using the equivalent of 2, they paid too much.
Our staff trust me, another thing that I've seen this year, is that our staff goes over and above to help people when they come in here. Sometimes I've seen them drag people along, trying to get them to give us numbers, to give staff flow rates so they can calculate it. We try and use the lowest flow rate possible to be the lowest ERUs, because at the end of the day, our job or their job is to charge people a fair amount. They only want to charge for the impact that someone has on the system. That said, it is the member's responsibility to make that real, to make it what it's supposed to be initially. We can't go back on an annual basis and reduce somebody's rate, or reduce somebody's impact fee because they were wrong. We give them every opportunity up front to give us the correct amount, the correct number. But that's the responsibility of the member.
And Mr. President, one of the reasons we cannot go backwards is because once the member gave the numbers to the engineers, they build to that spec. So if you tell us that you want X X number of ERUs, they go and build to that spec. And so we spend the money to build to that spec. And then you're saying, well, no, I don't. Well, all of our members have paid more. There's money, we built to a spec, and it's about the reserving of capacity into that. So we can't now undo what we've spent because of that. So once the member and staff have agreed that this is the number, we build that, we spend the money to that. And so if you say, nope, I'm sorry, I didn't use it, it's an outlay of all members.
My point would be a customer that came in and said, these are my numbers, and staff said, well, no, because of the numbers of toilets and sinks and all the stuff that goes into the calculation of how much they're gonna get billed for their impact, you know, they say you've gotta pay for this much, capacity or use or whatever. Well, you know, after a couple of years, you know, they get reviewed, and they're only using what they said we're gonna use, and so, you know, in the other instance, we're gonna charge people more, but in this instance, we're not gonna give them money any back. I mean, it doesn't say that in here, so.
Can I make a recommendation on this? You wanted a question answered, go ahead.
I just have a question, Phil, don't we normally, use people's actual, the numbers that they provide us?
I can't say that what Mark used an example never happens. However, generally speaking, Hauling the Bar goes out of their way to help the incoming customer find the most appropriate equivalent use within the area or as close to the area to charge an impact fee. And so you're using the potential of someone else similar or multiple similar things to charge that impact fee. We go way out of our way to do that. And that's Hauling Bar staff. I can't say, Mark, that there's never been, there are people that come through the door, and because Hauling the Bar has to have a policy that has to have some number in it, because if they don't want to help themselves, there has to be a standard. So in the policy right now, it's the state of Florida's guidelines or requirements for the sizing of septic tanks. It's a set accepted standard. So if you come in here and you don't even want to take advantage of the policy, that's what you're going to get charged, and that's the capacity we're going to reserve for you, or as Mike said, that's what we're going to build for you. And you may never use it, the next guy might, but we give you every opportunity. There are people that do that, believe it or not. Actually, it's the larger businesses that come in from out of town that they don't even want to mess around with it. They just want to develop, and they pay the fee based on the chart. And then there occasionally, Mark, I can't say that it never happens, someone will come in and try and use a comparable that staff just does not agree with. But when that happens, I can assure you there's always some legitimate reason why staff has said, nah, that's just not a true comparable. And this board has actually considered some of those over the last 3 or 4 years. But Mark, I can tell you, I mean, in most cases, because the policy already allows us to do what this more formalizes, we generally agree to them. So I can't say it never happens.
I was thinking, I don't remember if it was the Vine Bar or Gray Tap Room. There was one that we had a question on.
Well, that was a very interesting situation.
No, it was. I mean, it's like there wasn't a.
That situation may fall within the new.
Well, no, I mean it likely will, but I remember there was a question as to.
There was a question as to the validity of their comparable. However, I believe, and I could be wrong, Corey's not online, but I think at the end of the day, we gave them the comparable to the smaller facility that didn't do what they were going to do there. So,
my second question is, they're going to be reviewing every commercial account beginning on January 1st, every year going forward. Every 2 years, okay. every 2 years.
No,
Annual basis.
so the way we, several people have looked at this, there's been a suggestion made by staff on how to handle this. One, you can't implement this today. I mean, people need an opportunity to know what's coming. Even though the current policy kind of allows us, staff has been beat about the head and shoulders about this impact fee deal for years. And quite frankly, I'm sure that every single one of them thank Darrell for, he's heard as acting CEO this past year how badly they get creamed on this stuff. So the proposal is this. There would be a notice that would go out in, say, the first quarter of 2021 that would look at the 2020 use of every commercial account. And it would say, there's a new policy, we're going to enforce the old policy subject to this language. And by the way, according to the policy, you're good, your commercial establishment is good, you fall within the limits, or your commercial establishment, if evaluated in 2022, stays the same as the way it is, you will be subject to the following fees. So they'll get notification in the first quarter of 2021 that they may have a problem, and even if they don't, they'll get notified. And then January 1, 2022, you begin enforcing the motion that he just made right there. And then they would be notified based on 2021 usage, what situation they would fall in according to the motion that was made, and then have an appropriate amount of time to pay the fees.
So where I was going with that is, how much staff time is this gonna involve, and who's gonna be responsible for doing this review and sending out all these notices and dealing with customers calling in, and, you know, I mean, is it gonna be a time suck to do this, or, I mean, I know there's revenue that will come in because of this, that, you know, where people have been getting something they haven't paid for, but, at some point, you know, how much does that?
I would guess on what we've seen, that there's really not that much of a major impact to the vast majority of uses, because they're so small commercial. You wouldn't believe, and you asked the question earlier tonight that we can't answer, but I can tell you, based on past calculation, the average commercial bill is very low. Most commercial accounts are a bathroom and your realty office, and it's way less water than a residential connection. The calculation of where they are, that's going to be automatic. That can be automated with the new billing system. Absolutely, someone is going to have to review the letters that are generated and what happens then. But once it's established what happens to them, that goes into billing software, and that's automated.
So how many commercial accounts do we have? Approximately
490. Amber, do you remember? Did we lose Amber?
No, I don't know right off the top how many commercial accounts we have.
It's right around 500.
Relatively not.
It's in the, it was in the information we gave y'all.
Here's my biggest concern on it. And I understand the reason behind it. Like Mike stated, people paying for what they get. It's not fair for other members to have to pay for someone else to get something for free. But my only problem on this is, what if I paid for 5 ERUs and I'm only using 2? I want a refund on my other 3. Do I get that?
Somebody may come in the future and use it. Whenever they were originally sold, they were sold as that. You know, you kind of go back into your question that you asked originally, which was, okay, are you going to charge me based on what I would have paid at the beginning, or what the rates are today? Well, if you're going to get refunded it, pay what it is today, or what it was back then.
And you understand my thinking behind this.
Yeah, it's impossible to.
I know that that's the problem.
It's not impossible to calculate when it's.
I think it's right there.
Yeah, it's just no. You can't do that. I
me ask you this, business has been around since 1970. Do we have all that historical information as to how many ERUs they have?
That's gonna be, you know,
We have one Dixie, we have
there's
one
gonna be
Dixie
some
number.
businesses out there we can't do anything.
Probably, yes. Mark, there are absolutely positively going to be commercial accounts that there is not going to be a record of what they paid, and there will have to be an assumption. Fortunately, all those that we've seen are in the bathrooms and the small commercial that have been around since forever. Most of the bigger commercial accounts, the number exists, but there are going to be some that we don't have the information. And in that event, we would have, if there was one that staff couldn't make a decision, we would have to come back to this board with a recommendation as to what impact fee they would have paid for day one. And I would suggest, again, in that case, you're going to be very liberal to that person. Hey, let's just take the Winn-Dixie. If we didn't have the amount of ERUs that Winn-Dixie reserved when they pay their impact fee, what I would suggest is you take a long-term average of their water use, and you have to assume that Holly and Bar charged them appropriately back then.
Let's say when Dixie though, 15 years ago, they had a deli where you could sit down and eat there, and you had a restaurant inside Winn Dixie that's not there anymore. They closed that down years ago. So they probably paid more areas than they're going to use.
Philosophically, this Phil Phillips, philosophically, we built something for them back then, Will, that we had to supply water to them. And there is a reservation of impact fee and capacity on this system that sits. If the Winn-Dixie abandoned the site and some other grocery or even higher water use.
Or a dollar store one, and let's say lesser use.
They would get credit for what they paid way back then. It's a reservation of capacity.
My guess is if we don't have a record of it, we can't come in and say you owe us more money.
I absolutely agree that you would have to look at some kind of average mark, and you would have to be fair to
But you
that.
guys look at it case by case in that case, and you'll come to us if you.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we would have to, and again, a lot of those would be one bathrooms, and like, I keep saying realty because you're a realtor, but you understand the point.
Yeah,
And
my
back-
office has been there since 1970, so it's
And-
like, you know,
and
what
back-
did they pay back then? Who knows?
Back then, there was a minimum one ERU charge, so I know what you paid. You paid an ERU.
They had a chicken restaurant in there.
Oh,
So,
then
a
you
gas
might have paid
station,
more.
and- yeah.
You might be getting over you selling.
More, there's about 470 market accounts.
Okay.
All right. Got a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Okay. On this issue? Yes. Okay.
Hi, Bill Anderson, 8175 Stillwater Cove. I'm here on behalf of the Emerald Coast Wildlife Refuge. We're a unique organization in all of the United States of America, so it's not unusual that we would be unique underneath the service that y'all provide us too. But a number of the discussions, we would be the exceptions to kind of what y'all have been discussing here. A, because we're a nonprofit, B, to some things we'll get to here in a second about the impact usage. I would encourage you, as you stated, that your customers that face hardships can ask for relief, to not forget your nonprofits in that category about what you're proposing in terms of increasing impact fees, increasing usage rates, etc. That would be my comment, gentlemen.
And part of this resolution does include the ability to finance anything that's going to be over $1,000. It's written in there that we would allow them to go before the board and get financing approved of it.
That's helpful, and you certainly helped the Emerald Coast Wildlife Refuge out in the case that we're fixing to talk about. But again, in the case we're fixing to talk about, we provided historical data based upon an old facility that we, as the Emerald Coast Wildlife Refuge, was paying for the water usage of the beach cleaning equipment for the county of Bogalusa.
Can we get past this?
Absolutely.
Motion.
My point being is if you retroactively look at will, and I believe your point as well, if you charge us too much for the impact fee, and there's no relief from that overcharge, that I have an issue with that.
I just wanna make a comment on this. I appreciate Daryl putting this forward. I appreciate staff working on this, and I understand the logic behind it. As points have been made, some people never paid an impact fee years ago. Some may not have paid enough, in the way the calculations are done. And I know, I think we're more than fair nowadays. I think staff definitely goes above and beyond. The only way I could honestly vote for this implementation, it would have to be from any new business from here forward. That's the only way I could vote for this. But I would agree with that. That's my opinion.
All right, so let me explain this just a little bit further because we're kind of getting off track. Currently, the water usage agreement that everyone signs, all commercial accounts sign, says that if they have any water usage, if they exceed the water usage that they pay for, then the additional impact fees will become immediately due. And if they aren't paid, their water will be shut off. The problem with that is the same way it is with the problem that I've seen over the past year with a lot of our policies here is that the board will make a policy and then they'll forget about it. And whenever Joe on the street comes up to a board member and says, you know what those guys down at the water system did to me? They did this. And the real answer to that question is, those guys down there at the water system didn't do anything to you. I did. I'm the board member that made that policy. Okay? That's what this clarifies. Okay, guys? It does provide a little relief. In this resolution right here, it says if it's more than $1,000, we'll finance it for them. Okay? The current situation doesn't allow for financing. The current situation says you either pay it or you shut the water off. This is actually better for the customer. It also solidifies the fact that we as a board, we recognize that this is a policy that we have made. So maybe somebody watching tonight will see it. And rather than getting mad at employees that work here, they'll come to a board member and try and get you to change this policy in the future, or you to change some other policy in the future. But it'll mean that our staff can do their job without thinking that, without having the public think that they're the reason that their water rates are what they are. They're the reason that their tap fees are what they are. They're the reason that they have to do this, that, and other thing. It's just something that I've observed over the past year. Actually, a lot longer than that. It's really come to light over the past year, seeing the things. Seeing some of the employees and what they've really done and what they do. And they just do what we as the board tell them to do. Only they get beat up by the public for it. And sometimes we as board members tell the public that, man, I have to look into that, figure that one out. They shouldn't be doing that. When it's us, they're told to do it.
So there's already a current policy that the board approved stating that if their usage rate is more than 10%.
Actually, I'm not even sure it says 10%. It just says that if your water usage is more than what you paid for, you'll owe additional impact fees.
So by doing this, we're gonna do a year study to see the highs and the lows, peak and non-peak.
That's right.
And give them the opportunity, if there is an increase, that the water system is willing to finance it. Anything over $1,000.
Yeah, and the main thing goes back to what you said before, which is conservation. In here, we're giving them 12 months to get their water usage back under control. They may not know that they may not know that they have a problem. They may have a leak. I've got a leak at my house. You know what? That leak costs me about $10 a month, and I'm not worried about finding it $10 a month. If they came out to me, or came out to my house and said, hey, Daryl, you're going to owe us $5,000 more in tap fees if you don't fix this leak, I'm going to find that leak.
So the motion made on this then would be to amend the current policy, and this would supersede it then.
There currently is, it's a user agreement. It's not a regular policy, right? It's just a user agreement.
So then we'd amend the user agreement.
That's right. And the user agreement will be superseded by the policy.
Okay, I just want to clarify that. So people understand there's somebody already in motion in the user agreement. This is gonna supersede that agreement. That's gonna be more beneficial to the users, so they don't get a phone call from the water system to say, look, you've used X amount of dollars, or we're just gonna shut your water off. This gives them an opportunity, if they can't afford to finance and pay for the extra water that they're using.
That's right.
And this is on the commercial, and not
Just
residential.
commercials. We're not messing with residential.
And so from what you just said, in 2022, when people get this, they should give them your cell numbers and stuff.
Certainly. And I'll tell them, you need to give that board up there. You can fix that. So is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, board members. I appreciate that. And I'm sure staff does. Okay. Emerald Coast Wildlife Rescue. Usage and impact. Last year, the wildlife, what year was it?
What was that?
2018. 2 years ago. They came and brought a staff, I think did we reduce it at that point? Bill, you were the president back then, I think you.
I remember they came in and based on the prior usage of their other facility, we came up with a number. And we were able to lower that to a different number, and then we were gonna review their usage for the next 2 years to make sure that they stayed within that confinement. And you're here today to tell us that you've used less water than we planned on.
I wish that I had those numbers, to be honest with you. I think that you will tell us that. That's what I suspect your staff has seen over the, it did start in March of 2019, just for clarification, when we came to this agreement. So since, and the agreement was that we would divide that $10,000 impact fee that was set up into 24 monthly payments of $416.67. Which started in April of 2019. So today we have paid $7,916.73 of that $10,000.
Go with you say that number.
Yes, sir, $7,916.73. And look, let me be very clear. Y'all's organization has been very supportive of the Emerald Coast Wildlife Refuge. Many folks in this room are personally supportive of the Emerald Coast Wildlife Refuge. We get that. We also get that this has probably been the most austere fundraising environment in 2020 that our organization has ever faced due to COVID. We have 4 major events that we generally do per year. We were able to execute one of those. That was only because it was outdoors, our golf tournament, and that was after a 4-month delay, I believe, that we could finally execute. So you guys are working some really big issues. What I'm asking the relief from y'all on is probably rounding dust from your perspective, but I can tell you from our perspective, it's a relief that we would very much appreciate. And frankly, in the revenue generation area of what we do, it's well needed. So my specific, just for a little more history to refresh the memory, we came to Santa Rosa County to our new campus from the old fire station on Usda Island in Fort Walton Beach. In that facility, ECWR paid for the entire water usage of that facility, even though the Usda County beach cleaning folks were using the water to wash down all their equipment on a daily basis that they used to groom the beaches. So when I presented that information, I made that known, but obviously your staff didn't have anything better to work on, right? Which is why, yes, sir.
What is your current water bill right now? Do you have any idea?
I do not have any idea.
Stormy,
I
do
should
you
have.
know what your water bill was last month?
I don't.
Barbara, is there any way to look that up?
It has in here their historical usage from December 19th to November 20th
We'll take you a couple minutes.
is 619. So they're using 2.063 ERUs and they were billed for 4.7 ERUs.
So to the point about we just had about the, when you set those impacts, and if we go retroactive reviews, I mean, we would be the ones that would, I would think, be entitled to a credit. And we kind of expected that moving forward because as I described that was the only usage information we had to provide you.
I've got a question. Corey, are you on? No, Corey's not on here. Corey's not. Bill. Yeah, okay, Bill. I know we've got 619 gallons per day, average, but what is our peak? Because I would imagine you use a lot more during the summer than you do during the winter, correct?
No, not necessarily, and here's why. Well, yes, in the spring and the fall, we certainly have baby season, we have more animals, etc. But this has been such an awkward time frame. So we established this account in March 2019, right? We didn't actually get open for business until November, December. We got our first certificate of occupancy in November and we're open for our grand opening to the public in December 2019. So we were paying those impact, that 417 amount from from April until when we actually got open in December without any real usage. So it's really difficult.
You really opened your business in November, December 2019.
Yes, sir, which is why we waited until this time period Corey did to actually do the review, which obviously seemed fair to us, right? I mean, those first months when we weren't open, not much usage there.
Just to ask, do you think that 2020 has been representative of what your business is going to be for?
I don't in terms of, we've had some very, you would think our business has been off in terms of the number of animals we've cared for. Actually, it's been at least on average, if not higher, due to the hurricane impacts we had in the area that brought us a whole bunch of animals. We've had an unusual mortality event declared by NOAA for our marine mammal stranding animals that we also cover for the county. So that unusual mortality event is due to the freshwater intrusion into the Gulf of Mexico, which is causing our dolphins, whales, sea turtles, manatees, etc. to face some freshwater poisoning issues. So our workload is actually up. So I would imagine that would result directly into our water usage being up. You would think it would have been the opposite because we had to close down to the public shortly after we opened for our education center for 3 months. Is that right, Stormy?
Yes.
My question would be, because this has been an odd year, I would assume that you haven't had, the numbers of field trips, kids from schools coming through and touring the facility and having to use the bathroom, wash their hands, whatever. I mean, so while there has been some increases, there may have also been, a lower number than normal of people coming and touring the facility. Would that be a fair statement or not?
I can't really speak to it because, again, with the COVID, we haven't had any field trips to speak of other than private schools, et cetera. The public school systems are kind of reticent, obviously, as they just figure out how to conduct business, whether in a classroom or remotely, to really strap on field trips. I can tell you, though, since we opened, we had some significant events that brought huge numbers of people to our campus, more than we would expect ordinarily. Our grand opening, a few dedications of habitats to include that large raptor rehabilitation complex. I wish I could give you a better answer, sir, but I just can't.
Are you 100% built out now, or?
We're 100% built out. Yes.
Let me ask you some questions so I get dates right. So 2019, what month was that?
March of 2019 is when we formulated the agreement where the impact fee was set for $10,000 to be paid over the 24 months starting in April of 2019.
Okay, now, there's two parts to this.
Yes, sir.
Historically, the water system has always done a 2-year review historically. Now, with the current policy that we've had, that we just revised, which Mr. Lynch recommended, that makes it easier on a commercial impact if there is a more of a usage rate, is a lot more friendlier than it used to be. So I'm gonna agree with you on that. Now, this is my recommendation. Now, I would wait a full another year, so you have a 2-year basis on your usage to make sure you don't get caught up with the fact that if we were to refund you money because of your ERUs and what you're using, if you come back a year from now because you've exceeded your ERU usage, you're gonna have to pay that money back again. And right now, you currently have it financed at a certain rate at a certain price.
I would just tell you that our usage, I believe your folks will tell you, is below what they had to project based upon they had to project on the numbers where Okaloosa was washing out their equipment.
Right.
That's never going to change for the $10,000. So the agreement was that we would review in a year. We're at that year, a little past actually. So what I'm actually asking is give us relief from the rest of that $10,000 since that's unpaid for the next, 4 months or whatever it would be until that total balance was paid up. So cap us off from that impact fee at the $7,916.73 we've already paid, since we know that our usage is less than the impact fee that we were charged for. And then on that usage, like I say, we're built out. We're just not gonna have significant, I hear what you're saying, Will, I just don't see it in there.
I would hate to see if we were to do something partially and hastily, I guess is the word I'm looking for, and I understand both perspectives of it, but if we were to hastily do this and then come back a year from now, you're gonna pay it again. That's what I'm afraid of.
We've already paid too much, I guess, is the point. And secondly, the relief a year from now isn't nearly as important to ECWR as the relief right now based upon the fundraising scenario I've tried to paint the picture of in the COVID-19 environment. So there is a sense of urgency certainly here on the ECWR.
So you paid $7,916 towards, how much was the total fee?
The $10,000.
$10,000.
So there's $2,659 remaining.
Yes, sir.
I guess I've got a few questions here, if you don't mind.
No, sir.
So when you first brought this to the board, it looks like, so the fee was 4.7 ERUs. The account was credited to have an impact of 4.7 ERUs for a total of $10,575. Does that sound correct?
Sir, I can't talk to any of the ERU data. That's stuff that y'all all handled internally, and we are never provided that information.
My question here is, because this is where I'm going to be taking stances, is if there's an ERU, is Clinton, are you speaking on behalf of this?
I can speak to it some. Yes.
How did we get 4.7, and did they agree to the 4.7?
It was on data that they provided from where they were in Fort Walton Beach. The data seemed to be high, so we did give them a break. I'm not exactly sure what it is.
$575.
There you go. So remember, we're talking about potential impact. We beat this subject up several minutes prior to this coming up here. Of course, you got a recommendation, and we're not against the wildlife refuge. We will help them as much as we can, but I think it set a bad precedent for us to try to refund potential impact fees. We've also went out of our way. We installed a 6-inch water main and a fire hydrant. It cost $21,500 out of body water system's pocket to try to help out the wildlife refuge. So I think we've gone above and beyond to try to help them out.
Right. So I guess my question to you is, when there is in this case, it's 4.7 ERUs, do they sign off on that? Do they agree to this?
Yes.
That's just simply not true. We stated from the very beginning that we knew our usage figures were skewed because we were paying for the water usage in the previous facility for Usda Island Beach cleaning.
Mike, they did come before the board and they gave a presentation, and the board agreed to charge them
what they charge them.
10,000.
Right.
But then we would review it in, it says here 6 months. We'll go like, yeah, we can do a 6-month review then. And it's been more than 6 months. But yeah, I think and I was in that meeting and asked that question, and I think the intention of the board then was to give them an opportunity to demonstrate what their actual water usage would be and to come back before the board and we would reconsider how much they would be charged. Now, he's paid $7,916.73. I just did a rough calculation. That's 3.5 ERUs that he's paid for. Current average usage is 2.063 ERUs. So if we were to cap it at what he's already paid in, for now, I mean, obviously this is going to get reviewed again, subject to our new policy. But if we cap it now, he's, as long as he stays under the 3.5 ERUs, he wouldn't be charged any additional money. And he's using 2.06 right now, so, he'd have to come close to doubling his usage, or, almost doubling it in order to have to owe anything over and above what he's already paid in. I'm kind of leaning towards, I don't know if we should refund anything back on it, but
And that's not our request, we're just asking.
I'm thinking they paid in almost $8,000 of the $10,000, and that's more than what they're currently using. So I don't want to refund any money, but I don't think we should continue to charge them.
So here's a fundamental decision, and I know the two of you going out, so assuming that you get reelected, Grant, the fundamental decision that this case brings up is we built and we paid for 4.7 ERUs in the design. All right, so it's built and paid for. So you bought a Ferrari, and then we go out and buy it for you, and then you say, well, I don't need the Ferrari, I want the Ford, right? Because this is what we already built.
And I agree with you to a certain point where Mark just stated, we were supposed to review this 6 months after March 2019 to see what the usage was. We've already stipulated that when we granted them the possibility for relief on this.
To your point about the Ferrari, we all knew that we weren't driving a Ferrari, but we were paying Ferrari payments based upon subsidizing Okaloosa County's water usage. So we knew for a fact that we didn't need the capability that you built.
But you agreed to that when you gave the score back.
We did not agree to it. We had no choice. Your staff told us that they had to use their current figures of our usage in our previous facility. We never agreed that those were the accurate numbers, ever.
Based on the new current policy that the board approved, like you stated, if we were to honor what we previously approved with the agreement with the wildlife refuge, if they exceed their 3.5, they're gonna have to pay it then.
Right. Exactly. And that's the reason I'm saying I don't want to create a situation where we're refunding money, but I feel like they paid in more than what they're using, and
So where does this stop?
Right here.
well, see, the thing is, he came to us before those impact fees were charged in the first place and appealed to the board, and the board made a commitment to him that you come back to us in 6 months and we'll look at it again if it's okay. So this is an exception, not something that's the norm.
Based on information provided to us in the documentation, the board did say, and I remember the meeting, that in 6 months we will review this because they felt the number was high at that point, but he went along with it anyways because they needed water.
I can see both sides of it, but here's where I'm stuck on, okay? Where Mark said, and it typically is something that can be reviewed and looked at again after a period of time to see, were those tap fees excessive or right on target with what you're using? Will said, yes, we can do a 6-month review then. It's my opinion that they didn't start until December of 19. With the COVID that we I don't think you've had 6 straight months of a normal cycle to see where your tap fees really would be in a real year. I think that I'm not making judgment, passing judgment whether it's right or wrong. But I am saying I think that this is the wrong time to be reviewing it when you don't really know what reality is.
Okay, so if we wait 24 years, I've already paid the full the Emerald Coast Wildlife Refuge, let's be clear here, has paid the full $10,000 impact fee that we knew was too high in the first place, per Mr. Miller's comments. We've already paid for more than we're using. We need the relief, folks. This has been, look, what rounding does to you all is very important to our
Actually,
little
sir,
nonprofit.
that's not rounding us. That's actually our members' money.
I understand, we own 5 properties here in the county, I'm one of your members.
What I wanna do is, I wanna make a recommendation. My motion to the board is to approve Emerald Coast's Wildlife Refuge recommendation or request to consider money already paid to be paid in full for the agreement we made when we approved this. And consider it paid in full at 3.5 ERUs. Now, you understand by doing this, I just want to make sure you understand this. On January 1st, there's going to be a review of everything, and anybody that has exceeded what they paid for, you're going to have to pay for.
I do understand that, but I'm also powerless to do anything about that based upon the motion you just adopted.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. So as for further discussion, again, we are allowing a special exception. We just had a big problem with this special exception at county commissioners meeting. We're allowed, and I understand what you guys are doing. I applaud you. I support you absolutely. And I hope you don't feel
I don't. Look, I realize you're making policy for your entire member base. We get it. Again, we're unique in the entire United States. We just happen to live here in the service area that you provide.
I honestly applaud you guys, and I love it and everything like that. My concern is now, we built 4.7, or, 4.7. Even if you were to say, okay, you're done. So they get 4.7 ERUs at the cost of 3.6. Is that what you were recommending?
No. They get what they paid for, which is 3.5. Is that correct, Mark?
Yes.
They get 3.5 ERUs. That's all they get. If they exceed that, they have to pay the increase. That's what he's willing to accept. And that's based on previous board action where we asked for a 6-month review, and evidently it never came back to the board.
I'm gonna come there, everybody's gonna come to the board and say, I would like you to do a review and do the right ERUs.
But this was a case where he came to the board before they were even charged and made a case that this is way more than we're gonna use because our only historical data includes another business operating under the same roof with them. So
That's correct.
you know, that's where this is different. If somebody comes to us after the fact and said, you charged me too much, if they didn't question it on the front end, and didn't come before the board, and the board didn't make a commitment to them to review it, later, that would be a different situation. This one, we made a commitment that we would look at it again, and if he was using less water, we would account for that. And it's actually,
We never
if we were
did.
gonna be completely fair, we'd be owed him money right now. So, he's not asking for that. He's just, asking that we cap it at what he's already paid in.
I know we're saying that we did that. I know that was some of the discussion. That was not part of the original motion, giving money back. I guess what we're really discussing tonight is hauling of our water system is our,
It's really,
we've donated $21,500 of our members' money to the organization because the board was feeling rocky with somebody else's money. And now we're talking about doing this also. I guess you could make the argument that technically they have paid that they're below on the ERUs I would just caution the board in doing this. I don't think we really know what their true usage is gonna be in the future. But that's just my opinion.
The discussion on the fire line also involved, that fire hydrant and extension of that line would benefit more than just their business. I mean, but yes, it mainly benefited just them, but it would benefit future businesses that go in there anyway.
Could I specifically address usage? Carol Anderson, 8175 Stillwater Code. I'm the immediate past executive director.
Ma'am, I need to hear you better. Ma'am, you need to come to the microphone.
Carol Anderson, 8175 Stillwater Cove. I'm the immediate past executive director of Emerald Coast Wildlife Refuge. I've paid all the bills throughout this entire period. And I would just like to offer that we had an overwhelming response by our great community our first few months in business. And we had far more people than on the property than I ever expected. Hundreds of people, grand opening days, hundreds of people for different events. When COVID hit us, yeah, we shut down. And then we had the biggest baby season we've ever had. And I will tell you, we were doing 18 loads of laundry every single day. Our washers and dryers broke and we had to take them down to the bar laundry. So I can verify that we were using an amazing amount of water. I think that we hit Sally end when we should have been decreasing the amount of usage that we had. It didn't decrease. So you're concerned about what's going to happen in the future. I think we've had an amazing first year, and I don't see the repeat of this kind of usage again. And we started here based off numbers that came from county services using water that we had to pay for to spray off giant pieces of equipment every single day that were out on the beach that had sand all over them. I can tell you, I don't think personally that our organization used a third of what we paid in Okaloosa County.
Thank you. Is there any more discussion?
Can you restate the motion? I'm sorry, I've already forgotten.
Yeah.
My motion is to consider what Emerald Coast Wildlife Refuge has paid in to cover 3.5 ERUs, and that be noted on their account, and we'll consider it paid in full.
And I seconded that.
All right, so, again, I'm just gonna state, I mean, I understand, so right now.
Okay, and I'll clarify the motion. Based on previous board discussion with Emerald Coast Wildlife Refuge on reviewing their usage prior to providing them service.
We are saying that whatever they pay right now, that is their number of ERUs, which you said it was 3 point something.
3.5.
3.5. They won't owe anything more. But we are not setting precedents here where we're gonna have everybody coming up to this board asking for us.
I agree 100%. That's why I clarified my motion. What my statement was. Mark, do you second my clarification?
Yes, second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank all of you. I appreciate your support.
Just let everybody know, I don't believe there's.
I get it. You're setting big policy for you.
In this country or the next. All right, CEO vehicle purchases, I did not get the close back in time, so we will be discussing this a little later. I'll probably put out a board action type meeting within the next week, to stay within budget.
But that's in the, it's in the budget.
It's in the budget.
All right. Thank you for clarifying. Dude, those probably cost more than those are like $10,000. Have you seen what they're worth?
Personnel committee,
I spoke to Stephanie at Landrum. You guys were supposed to have a Zoom meeting. Is that tomorrow? Tomorrow? Okay, so just you're getting up to speed with Stephanie, that's our HR department, so, okay. And my recommendation next year for the board, so it's on record, I definitely recommend, Mike Kennedy being the personnel committee chair, because I will not be on the board next year, and he's been so helpful with that with me, because I've been really busy at work, but Mike has really stepped up, and he's helped out a lot, he knows a lot of ins and outs and a lot, so that would be my recommendation to the board for next year.
And you've been awesome. Thank you for being part of this journey. It's been a weird year.
It's been a weird year. Golf course committee is Fred. I don't believe he had anything tonight, but I would ask that everybody keep him in prayers. They're in the hospital right now. But, had to miss him. That is the end of the Holland Bar Water System portion of the meeting. Chloe didn't agree. Cindy?
Yes, sir.
You wanna take it away?
Absolutely. So our finances for November were pretty good. Our revenue, was $155,794, with total expenses of $172,496, which leaves us with the course operating income of negative $6,701 before depreciation. Of that number, I do want to note that we had 22,000 of professional fees that we had to pay. So, overall, it was really a good month for us.
Probably the attorneys writing us the legal documents.
And I have a question, it is Holland Navarre Water that is considering selling a golf course. So would that legal expense, or should that legal expense be an expense of Holland Navarre Water, not the golf course? It's not really relative to golf course operations.
The club at Hidden Creek is selling that asset to the club at Hidden Creek. That's what. So it would be an expense of the club at Hidden Creek.
Which is owned by Holland Navarre Water, and the reason
At
we're
the end of
selling
the
it is
day,
because we don't want to manage.
At the end of the day, the money that's in the checking account is the club at Hidden Creek. Belongs to Holland Navarre.
Right.
There's $300,000. I would imagine if we asked our auditors, it's gonna be an expense of the club at Hidden Creek.
Okay, if it makes sense tax wise to do that, that's fine, that's my question. Okay. I'm not sure if you were done, Cindy, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's fine. I was just gonna report for the year-to-date. The course operating income before depreciation is a positive $144,535, which is really a great number considering we were closed for almost 2 months between COVID and the hurricane.
Cindy, did we fill out the necessary paperwork for the PPP loan?
For the forgiveness, we have submitted it. We're just waiting on a final approval.
Okay, thank you.
And have we received a response on our Hurricane Sally insurance claim? Did we have any coverage there?
I was in contact with them even this week, and the tree damage was not covered, but they're still looking into the net coverage.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Mr. President, I make a motion to approve the 2020 financial statement. I'm sorry. What did I say? Oh. I will state, make a motion to approve the November 2020 financial statements for Hidden Creek.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any other further discussion? None noted. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The next one is update on the sale of the 52 documents. We're moving on. We've got
how many packets have been picked up?
I believe we had three out.
Is the deadline listed on one of our water system website?
It is, it's January like 8th or 9th, I think, or something like that. It's after the first of the year.
Right. The next thing for the people who are interested is the 21st of this month, for the deadline for question submittal. So we go from there. We've got a nice little calendar laid out, and they're aware of the calendar dates as well. Can I get a copy of that? Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Anything else, Cindy?
I don't have anything else to report.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
On the engineering, Bill?
I don't have anything specific to report. You have all the normal reports. I'll entertain questions if anyone has anything.
How are we going with the RIP system? Is there anything new to report on that?
The engineers are underway, we actually had, we called it a kickoff meeting, this past week. Wasn't really a kickoff meeting because they've been working for 2 months, but it was our first regularly scheduled status meeting. And we held it when we did because they had completed the survey of the wastewater treatment plant portion. So the purpose of the first meeting was to discuss where that master lift station will go on the wastewater treatment plant property. So everything is going according to schedule at this point.
Cool, thank you.
How are we negative?
We hope that we would be negative I&I. So you send 300 gallons one day to a house and a guy washes his car. Well, the amount of water that he washes his car with doesn't come back to the sewer plant. So typically hauling a bar, we really don't have good specific data for hauling bar because we've always had kind of an I&I problem. But if you look at like industry average, during the summer, we should only get about 75% of our water use back. And during the winter, we should probably only get about 85% of our water use back. So even when we show sewer and water being the same thing, we're still seeing I&I. We should be negative each and every month. And as Mark pointed out, we have been very fortunate with I&I. That doesn't mean it doesn't still exist. It just means we haven't been seeing rain and the groundwater's down, but I can still take you places and show you where we have a problem today.
All right, I guess we will open it up for public forum.
Carmen, do you want to go up there and speak? Just Carmen Reynolds give your address again, so I don't know what it is. Go ahead, Carmen.
Carmen Reynolds, 9621 Sunnybrook Drive, Navarre.
Carmen Reynolds and I have, with the board's direction, we have been working on increased fire protection for all of our water system. We met with Chief Ron Norton Friday last week, and we're able to go over the fire hydrant assessment. Now, remember, this came out on 5/1/2018. We tasked the fire department to identify some areas that they felt we needed to increase fire hydrants and increase line size in order to adequate the bigger houses. Question I just want to put out to the board, and this is something I did not realize. So, a property owner goes to the variance board to get a variance. And let's say they want to split a lot that is designed for one house for 2 houses. Okay, not a problem. The variance board approves it. When the variance board approves that, it doesn't take into consideration that they just increased fire protection needs on that street. So therefore, the county doesn't charge an impact fee for fire protection. So I just want to lay this out for you. So when you have a person that doesn't do a subdevelopment, because when you do a subdevelopment, there is an impact fee that we charge for that, for the increased line size and all that. Well, the problem you have, if a person decides to take, let's say, one lot and break it up into 4 houses, or multiple family houses on one lot, the county doesn't require at that time for impact for increased increased fire protection. Okay, so that burden is put on the water system. And currently, we can't go to the other members and say, look, we have to increase fire protection because the lot size density has changed. So instead of putting one house on a piece of property, we're gonna put two. And the problem you have with that is the builder isn't being charged for that. So therefore, it falls on the water system to be responsible for that. And with the cost of that, it's hard to do. So what we've tried to do, Ms. Reynolds and Chief Norton, Phil has made some recommendations on block grants and certain grants. I talked to the chief and I said, if you're able to get funds to help facilitate this fire protection, increase fire protection for the water system, we could present it to the board to provide matching funds. So everybody has skin in the game on this. And currently, Ms. Carmen has some ideas for the fire department and possibly the water system to apply for grants to receive money to provide this.
And before she goes down there, can I make the point that if they do split that lot and build two houses on it, you've got two houses that are gonna be paying fire assessments every year, based on their square footage. So, whereas you would have had one house before, you're now gonna have two houses paying that annual fire assessment. So while there's no impact fee.
I'm happy you brought that up.
Yeah.
But the problem is, this is a special fire district, so this district doesn't get the money from the county like Pace and Jay does. We don't get that county money.
Right, no, they don't get any impact fees for fire. It's all just because it.
What did they get? They're like $1 million went towards. So I'm not gonna hold you to the number. What did Pace and Jay get from the county?
I don't think they did.
Pace is now a new independent special fire district, and the director of public safety, who's also the emergency operations director, told me today that Pace has had some success in that they have established a monthly fee for upgrades, fire hydrant maintenance, and infrastructure. So they increased their Pace water fee to accommodate that. And he said that there are 3 other ways to do that. The gentleman that was here last month, Mr. Campbell, it sits on, if I misstate this, correct me, sits on the local mitigation strategy task force. Did I get it right? And he said that's a long wait to get into that queue, but that could certainly be one way to identify the needs. So, we might need to break this out. Right now, I think they're trying to address Holly by the Sea's need for hydrants.
Because we have to see that.
Right.
I don't know that anybody else in the bar does.
And it might be worth looking at appointing someone to that. And I'd be willing to find out how you get involved in that and how you get appointed to it. But to have a seat on that committee, that task force might be a really good idea. Then you could identify a portion of the needs and break it out that way. The second way, he talked about the USDA grants. And at the present time, we supplied the fire station and the fire chief with a list of grants when we met him originally with President Lynchard last year on December the 26th, but they've been kind of busy and we had to remind them to follow up. So he is actively looking at those grants last week and this week, the fire chief is. And then finally, Brad Baker talked about an MSBU, and that's brought some issues. There's another type of grant. We talked about the community development block grant that's for the lesser incomes, and Mr. Phil Phillips is familiar with that. And we picked up that the county is actually submitting for 2 of those in Gulf Breeze, one in the New Hope Road area and one in the Ranchettes area. And I looked at the packages They don't all have to be low income, just the preponderance of them, because there are some higher income level people on that street, but it averaged out to where they were acceptable, and they could, the county's submitting on their behalf. So he advised that that fire chief check with the grants coordinator there, Mr. Jared Lowe, I'm sure you might know him, and see about breaking this out, working with the water system, figuring out what the plan is, and striating it. Maybe some on the task force, some with the USDA grants you don't get if you don't ask. Maybe also considering a dollar a month added to the water bill, but you guys kind of pierced that tonight, 6.2%, but it's still a possibility. And then the community development block grants. So where there's a will, there's a way. There's the information, John.
Dallas, I just wanted to give you this. This is the, put out 2018, so you have a copy. And this is the ISO rating of the fire department. And if they increase our ISO rating, it can also mean lower premiums for homeowners in our water area. Currently, right now, the water system provides testing equipment to the fire department. And what they do, they test the whole system over a 3-year period for flow and proper maintenance of the hydrants. And they test 1/3 of the system a year. And we provide them paint, and they take care of the painting and as far as the enhancement of the hydrants. And then they go through and make sure they're tested. And then generally what they do is they'll give us a list of hydrants that are out of service. And I think you said right now it's like 22 or something like that.
Yes.
Usually Brian Hicks and Clinton Wells make sure they get on that and get that fixed. That's why we need that one tool for the hydrant stem replacement. We talked about that. The $10,000 tool, so we're gonna replace the stem instead of having to dig up and replace the whole hydrant. So, and there's just some information for you. Here's the chief's card right here. Real nice guy. If you have any questions or any input on it, that would definitely be helpful.
Welcome to Holly Park.
Anybody else?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Kennedy seconds.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank y'all for coming.
Those next meetings is,
Annual meeting, 18th of January? Yes.
Gentlemen, I know you're tired again.